Welcome back everybody to another video. This video is going to be looking at England and how they beat Ukraine and a tactical analysis on how they did so. So before we start, check out my book. It is on Amazon and there's a link in the description below. Follow me on Medium as well. I posted a link to my Medium. It's just my blog site that I post written content to if you guys prefer that. I'm trying to produce more free content for everybody to deliver the highest quality content possible to all my followers and subscribers. So thanks all for the support, and I'm going to keep producing content in the meantime. But let's get right into the video. So England, they went with a back four, but this soon would become a three-man build-up, as we see John Stones just off our screen here. Declan Rice fading into the half space in the first line of build-up, vacating his central midfield position for Calvin Phillips to access. And then Phillips becomes our lone holding midfielder. From here, this allows Jadon Sancho to invert between the lines where he flourishes. And one thing with this rotation from England is I would have liked to see Kyle Walker then get higher earlier, as he did later in the game. But early on in the game, these rotations lack continuity in the sense that Kyle Walker didn't manage to get into a higher position to then threaten in behind. We would see then Calvin Phillips being the holding midfielder. He would have Jadon Sancho as the right attacking midfielder in the half space, inverting from his winger position, Harry Kane as the lone forward, and Mason Mount through the left half space. So these three players would help Phillips form a diamond through the midfield and into attacking positions. Ukraine first looked to counter this with a 5-3-2, giving them the flexibility through their defenders to jump between the lines and a midfield three to secure central corridors and shift with proper coverage, and two strikers to try and press the three-man back line, or the three-man build-up I should say, of England. Now the same picture here, but just from a different angle, we can see the three-man build-up created by Declan Rice, and now Phillips in the holding midfield position. The occupation between the lines of the three players, Mason Mount, Harry Kane, and Jadon Sancho. And now we really start to see the space that isn't occupied by England and Kyle Walker, their fullback. So as we see, usually when Declan Rice would drop into a deep lying playmaker position, this would elicit a response of Kyle Walker to jump into height to then occupy a more advanced position. And then we start to see asymmetry from this movement, with single width on one side and dual width on the other of Shaw and Sterling. Now we have Calvin Phillips dropping to create the back three in their initial phase of build-up, and this was one of probably their staples in possession. They would always look to create a back three, or majority of the time they would. And this player would either be Declan Rice, as we just saw, Calvin Phillips, or Kyle Walker. We saw more as the game progressed, would then come deeper and create the three-man back line, which gave them a little bit more security in transition, as Ukraine had a few chances early on in transition. When they would win the ball, they would have 5 players ready to attack against 4 players of the initial build-up. So by Kyle Walker being in this position, it gave them a little more pace and a little more security defensively. Now looking at all 11 players on the field for England and all 11 for Ukraine, we see the 3-1 build-up with the diamond shape in their initial first and second line. But now we start to see the players and how England moved to single width. So with Sterling and Sancho playing between the lines with Mason Mount, it allowed Mason Mount to free up his movement to play as a more of a free roaming 10 and take advantage of inverting runs from players like Raheem Sterling, because when Raheem Sterling would make these narrow runs, it would create space for Mason Mount by pinning players and allowing Mason Mount to get on the ball in the half space. Even though Mason Mount didn't have his most influential game so far, the movement between them was still pretty good, and I think if they get just the timing down a little bit more, they'll be very dangerous in the next game, and if they can progress into the final. The single width also contributed to the occupation of the space between the lines, with then Harry Kane playing as a pinning player. So often with runners running in behind either Sterling or Mason Mount, dynamically pinning the back 5, with Harry Kane, who is more stagnant in his movement when he pinned players to create space. They had a few different factors on moving the Ukraine defense to try and create space for players like Mason Mount and Jadon Sancho. Now we see Kyle Walker joining John Stones and Harry Maguire in the first line of build-up. This allowed Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips to both maintain their central position, and it gave Calvin Phillips more freedom to either drop as a second holding midfielder or advance between the lines into a more dangerous position and occupy as more of an advanced playmaker, using his versatility in possession and his ability to play multiple roles. With this happening, it forced Jadon Sancho to play in a more wide position and hold his runs to the space between the lines, as Calvin Phillips or Mason Mount coming across would occupy this space when Kyle Walker would typically stay in the first line of build-up. So now that we see the 5-3-2 setup of Ukraine against England's positioning, with Kyle Walker staying deeper, we see the ball being circulated, and now we start to see the overload of Mason Mount and Sterling between the lines in the left half space, as well as now a double pivot forming, or a natural relationship of a 6, 8, and 10, looking to control the space between the lines or get on the ball to affect the defense from shifting too far, and a few other dynamics in possession that they can show their versatility, that they don't always have to have the same rotations, and they have players that can play these multiple roles. Towards the end of the first half, there was an injury for Ukraine, which forced them to make a substitution and led to their switch in structure. So after the change was made, they moved to a 4-5-1, which gave them more stability in midfield when shifting from left to right, and it put their wingers in a position to then be able to go and press. Although they lost a central forward, this wasn't the most important thing, because typically England played with a single pivot, so usually when two forwards play next to each other, they better control a double pivot using both cover shadows. But with this, it gave the midfield three more flexibility, and the wide players were able to span across a greater distance. And especially in the first part of the game, the England fullbacks weren't advancing as much, so this seemed like a sensible move. But it seemed in the second half, the wingbacks or fullbacks of England started to get higher and wider, allowing the wingers to invert, or vice versa. So here, when we see the Ukraine side go towards a 4-5-1 using a lone striker, we immediately see England go to a 2-2 build-up with two holding midfielders, and sometimes Walker would slot in as the third central defender as well. But here we have a 2-2 build-up with two central defenders and two holding midfielders, and we start to see some versatility and qualities of Shaw that we hadn't seen previously, with him inverting between the lines and being able to get on the ball in dangerous positions, taking advantage of Kane's pinning and Sterling's pinning in the wide area, creating height and width. So this allowed Shaw to get on the ball between the lines, break lines, and then go forward with a three-man wide structure of Kane and Sterling. So here we are with the 2-2 build-up for England and seeing all 11 players. Typically, I'm not a fan of two holding midfielders and two central defenders playing in almost the same line, but here it makes sense because the eights of Ukraine are attracted to the holding midfielder, and with Shaw inverting off the left-hand side, it allows him to become free because the central midfielder is pulled out by the central midfielder of England, whereas the Ukraine player looking to use his cover shadow to block Sterling. It creates a natural space for Shaw to get on the ball between the lines, with then Harry Kane pinning both central defenders through his central positioning. It creates this space between the lines that we've now seen from Shaw and his qualities. He has the capacity to take advantage of this space, and maybe this is something they can use in the next round in the semi-final. So now just a quick look at England's defensive shape, because they have kept all clean sheets in every match so far in the tournament. So we'll just take a quick look at their 4-2-3-1, and I call it a 4-2-3-1 even though it could be a 4-2-4, 4-4-2, 4-2-2-2, but typically I like to think of it as a 4-2-3-1 because Mason Mount has shown that he's more in line with the wingers, and the two holding midfielders do play as two holding midfielders out of possession, although sometimes they have variability in possession of the ball, whereas Harry Kane is their natural lone forward without the ball. Ukraine also had a lot of variation in their build-up, and in the first 15 to 30 minutes of the game, they actually looked quite dangerous, with their most dangerous moments coming in transition because of England's compactness and the mobility of their two holding midfielders to then cover ground, and close down space between the lines, even with a lot of blindside movements coming from the wide area into more narrow positions and positional interchanges happening horizontally between the half space and wide area. But England did defend quite well against this, although the Ukraine movement did look good despite them not scoring, and their best chances coming from moments in transition when they would win the ball early on and then attack quick, showing good verticality when they did immediately win the ball and go forward. So that's the analysis, guys. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.